What happens when a prince walks into one of daytime television's hottest talk shows and things go from friendly to furious in a matter of minutes? It only took 38 seconds for Prince Harry to go from smiling guest to being escorted off the set of The View after what can only be described as one of the most shocking moments in live television history. This wasn't just a disagreement. This was a full-blown meltdown that left the audience gasping, the crew scrambling, and Whoopi Goldberg standing her ground like the absolute professional she's always been. The morning started out like any other episode. The studio was buzzing with excitement. Prince Harry was scheduled to appear to discuss his latest charity work and a new initiative he had been passionate about. The audience was packed. People were thrilled to see royalty up close and personal. The cameras were rolling. The energy was high. Everything seemed perfect. Whoopi opened the segment with her signature warmth and charm. She introduced Prince Harry with genuine enthusiasm, welcoming him to the table with a smile that could light up the entire studio. The audience erupted in applause. Harry walked out, waving to the crowd, looking relaxed and ready to have a good conversation. He took his seat next to Whoopi, and for the first few minutes, everything was going smoothly. Whoopi started with some light questions about his recent travels and his family. Harry answered with ease, cracking jokes and sharing stories that had the audience laughing. It was the kind of interview that everyone loves. Casual, fun, engaging. But then Whoopi shifted gears. She does what any good host does. She asked a real question, a question with substance. "So, Harry," Whoopi began, leaning forward slightly, "I want to talk about your charity work. You've been very vocal about certain causes, but some people have questioned whether you're using your platform for genuine change or just to keep yourself in the spotlight. How do you respond to that?" The audience went quiet. It was a fair question. A tough question, sure, but that's what journalists are supposed to ask. Harry's smile faded just a little bit. You could see his jaw tighten. He shifted in his seat and took a breath before responding. "Well, Whoopi," he said, his voice carrying just a hint of defensiveness. "I think that's a bit unfair. I've dedicated my life to helping others. I've been doing this work long before the media decided to pay attention. So to suggest that I'm doing this for attention is, frankly, insulting." Whoopi didn't back down. She's been doing this for decades. She knows how to handle a defensive guest. She smiled calmly and nodded. "I hear you," she said, "and I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply asking the question that a lot of people are thinking. You've got to admit, Harry, you're constantly in the news. You're doing interviews, writing books, making documentaries. At what point does it stop being about the cause and start being about you?" And that's when things started to go south. Harry's face changed completely. The friendly, charming prince was gone. In his place was someone who looked genuinely angry. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "You know what, Whoopi," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I came here thinking this would be a respectful conversation. But clearly, you've already made up your mind about me. You're just like everyone else in the media. You twist everything to fit your narrative." The audience gasped. You could feel the tension in the room. The other co-hosts looked uncomfortable, glancing at each other nervously. But Whoopi remained calm. She's a professional through and through. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't get flustered. She simply responded with the grace and poise that has made her a legend in this industry. "Harry," she said, her voice steady, "I'm not twisting anything. I'm asking you a direct question. If you can't handle that, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. This is what we do here. We have conversations. Real conversations. And sometimes those conversations are uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean we're attacking you." Harry scoffed. Actually scoffed. On live television. He shook his head and laughed. But it wasn't a friendly laugh. It was bitter and dismissive. "You don't get it," he said. "You sit here in your comfortable little studio, judging people you don't even know. You have no idea what I've been through. You have no idea what it's like to have every single thing you do scrutinized and criticized, and now you're doing the exact same thing." Whoopi's expression didn't change. She's faced down tougher opponents than an entitled prince having a tantrum. She folded her hands on the table and looked him straight in the eye. "Harry," she said, "everyone on this planet has been through something. You don't have a monopoly on struggle. And yes, you're scrutinized because you chose to remain in the public eye. You chose to do interviews. You chose to write a book. You chose to be here today. So don't sit there and act like you're some kind of victim when you're the one who keeps putting yourself out there." The audience started to applaud. They could see what was happening. Whoopi was speaking truth, and Harry didn't like it one bit. His face turned red. He uncrossed his arms and pointed a finger at Whoopi. "How dare you?" he said, his voice shaking with anger. "How dare you sit there and lecture me about my choices? You don't know anything about my life. You don't know what it's like to be me." Whoopi raised her eyebrows. She stayed calm, but you could tell she was done playing nice. She leaned forward, looking directly at Harry with an expression that said everything. "And you don't know what it's like to be me either," she said, her voice firm. "But here's the difference. I'm not the one sitting here complaining about it. I'm not the one who comes on shows like this and then gets upset when someone asks me a real question. If you can't handle the heat, Harry, then get out of the kitchen." The audience erupted. Some people were clapping. Some people were cheering. They loved it. Whoopi had just delivered the kind of no-nonsense reality check that she's famous for. But Harry was not having it. Not even close. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The entire studio fell silent. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what he would do next. Harry looked down at Whoopi, his face twisted with anger and indignation. "You know what?" he said, his voice loud now, echoing through the studio. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this. I don't have to take this kind of disrespect from you or anyone else. I'm a prince. I've served my country. I've done more for charity than you could ever imagine. And I certainly don't need to justify myself to you." Whoopi stood up too, but she didn't look rattled. She looked absolutely calm and in control. She crossed her arms and tilted her head slightly. "Well, Harry," she said, her voice dripping with controlled composure, "if that's how you feel, then maybe it's best if you leave. This is a place for honest conversation, not for tantrums. And if you can't handle being asked real questions, then you're right. You don't belong here." Harry's mouth dropped open. He looked genuinely shocked that she had just told him to leave. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at her like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then he let out a harsh laugh. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "Absolutely unbelievable. You know what, Whoopi? You can take your show and your self-righteous attitude and shove it. I'm done here." The audience gasped again, louder this time. People couldn't believe what they were witnessing. A member of the royal family, on live television, telling Whoopi Goldberg off and storming out. It was surreal. It was shocking. It was the kind of moment that would be replayed over and over again. But Whoopi didn't flinch. She didn't look embarrassed or upset. She simply nodded and gestured toward the exit. "The door's right there," she said calmly. "Feel free to use it." Harry ripped off his microphone, the wire tangling as he yanked it away from his collar. Then he threw it down on the table with a loud thud that made everyone jump. Then he turned and started walking toward the exit, his face red, his fists clenched. But before he could reach the door, he stopped. He turned back around, pointing at Whoopi one more time. "You're nothing but a bully," he shouted. "You sit there acting like you're so wise and so fair, but you're just another talk show host tearing people down for ratings. That's all this is to you. Ratings. You don't care about the truth. You don't care about people. You just want to make a spectacle." The studio was dead silent. The cameras were still rolling. Everyone was watching this train wreck unfold in real time. Whoopi took a deep breath and shook her head slowly. "Harry," she said, her voice still calm but with an edge to it now, "I've been doing this job for a very long time. I've interviewed presidents, celebrities, activists, and yes, even royalty. And I've never once torn anyone down who didn't deserve it. I asked you a fair question. You're the one who turned it into a spectacle. So if anyone's a bully here, it's not me. It's you. You came on my show, you disrespected me, you disrespected this platform, and now you're trying to make yourself the victim. That's not how this works." The audience started clapping again. This time it was louder. People were standing up, cheering for Whoopi. They could see right through Harry's tantrum. They could see that she had handled this with class and dignity, while he had acted like a spoiled child. Harry looked around at the applauding crowd, his expression shifting from anger to something else. Humiliation, maybe. Or disbelief. He couldn't seem to comprehend that the audience was siding with Whoopi and not with him. He shook his head again, muttering something under his breath that the microphones couldn't pick up. "This is ridiculous," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You people have no idea what you're talking about. You're all just eating up whatever she feeds you. You're sheep, all of you." And that was the final straw. Whoopi's face hardened. She pointed toward the door with a firm gesture. "Get out," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Get out of my studio. Now." Security appeared almost immediately. Two large men in dark suits moved toward Harry, not aggressively, but with purpose. They didn't touch him, but they made it very clear that he needed to leave. Harry looked at them, then back at Whoopi, and then at the audience. "Fine," he spat. "I'm going. But this isn't over. You'll be hearing from my lawyers. You can't treat me like this. I have rights." Whoopi let out a small laugh, the kind that said she'd heard that threat 1,000 times before, and it didn't scare her one bit. "You do that, Harry," she said. "You call your lawyers. And while you're at it, maybe call a therapist too, because you clearly need one." The audience roared. People were laughing, clapping, cheering. It was absolute chaos in the best way possible. Whoopi had just delivered the ultimate comeback, and everyone in that studio knew it. Harry's face turned an even deeper shade of red. He looked like he wanted to say something else, to fire back one more insult, but the security guards were already ushering him toward the exit. He had no choice but to go. As he walked away, he kept muttering and shaking his head, his body language screaming defiance and rage. The cameras followed him all the way to the door. People watched as he disappeared through the exit, the heavy door swinging shut behind him with a loud bang. And just like that, he was gone. Kicked off the view. Escorted out by security. On live television. Whoopi stood there for a moment, taking it all in. Then she turned back to the camera with a slight smile. "Well," she said, her voice light now, almost amused. "That was interesting. I guess some people just can't handle a little honesty. But that's okay. We're going to keep doing what we do here, which is having real conversations with real people who aren't afraid to be challenged." The co-hosts were still looking stunned. One of them let out a nervous laugh. Another one shook her head in disbelief, but Whoopi just sat back down like nothing had happened, ready to move on to the next segment. "Let's take a quick break," she said to the camera. "We'll be right back." The show cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. The entire exchange had been captured on live television. Millions of people had just witnessed Prince Harry lose his cool, insult the host, insult the audience, and get kicked off one of the biggest talk shows in America. It was the kind of moment that would be talked about for years. But let's rewind for a second and really break down what happened here. Because this wasn't just some random outburst. This was a perfect example of what happens when someone who's used to being treated like royalty comes face to face with someone who doesn't care about titles or status. Whoopi Goldberg is a legend. She's won an Oscar, a Grammy, a Tony, and an Emmy. She's one of the most respected figures in entertainment. She's interviewed everyone. And she doesn't pull punches. She asks the questions that need to be asked, even if they make people uncomfortable. That's her job. That's what makes her great. Harry, on the other hand, has spent his entire life being treated differently because of who he is. He's a prince. People bow to him. People cater to him. And when he stepped away from royal duties, he made it clear that he wanted to live a more normal life. But here's the thing about normal life. In normal life, people challenge you. They question you. They don't just accept everything you say as gospel. And that's exactly what Whoopi did. She challenged him. She asked him a tough question. And instead of answering it like a mature adult, he threw a tantrum. He got defensive. He got angry. He lashed out. He insulted her. He insulted the audience. He made himself look like the exact kind of entitled, out-of-touch person that critics have accused him of being. Let's talk about that moment when he said, "I'm a prince. I've served my country. I don't have to justify myself to you." That right there tells you everything you need to know. He genuinely believed that his title and his past service somehow exempted him from being held accountable. He thought that Whoopi should just accept whatever he said without question. But that's not how the real world works. Whoopi understood that. She's lived in the real world her entire life. She's worked for everything she has. She's faced challenges and obstacles that Harry couldn't even begin to imagine. And she's earned the right to ask tough questions. She's earned the respect that comes with being honest and direct. When she told him, "Everyone on this planet has been through something. You don't have a monopoly on struggle," she was speaking a fundamental truth. Harry has faced his share of difficulties, sure. Losing his mother at a young age was traumatic. Dealing with the media scrutiny was hard. But that doesn't mean he gets to act like his pain is somehow more valid or more important than anyone else's. And when he accused her of being a bully, of tearing people down for ratings, that was just projection. He was the one being aggressive. He was the one raising his voice. He was the one hurling insults. Whoopi stayed calm the entire time. She never lost her cool. She never stooped to his level. She simply stood her ground and refused to be intimidated. That final exchange before he left was particularly telling. When he said, "You're all sheep," referring to the audience, he revealed his true colors. He wasn't just angry at Whoopi. He was angry at everyone. He was angry that people weren't automatically taking his side. He couldn't understand why the audience was clapping for Whoopi instead of defending him. But the audience saw what was really happening. They saw a man who came on the show expecting to be treated with kid gloves. They saw someone who couldn't handle being challenged. They saw someone who resorted to personal attacks when things didn't go his way, and they responded accordingly. They supported Whoopi because she was in the right. And let's not forget that threat about lawyers. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers," he said, as if that was supposed to scare Whoopi. As if a woman who has been in the industry for decades, who has faced down far more powerful people than Prince Harry, would be intimidated by a legal threat. It was almost comical. It showed just how out of touch he really is. Whoopi's response was perfect. "You do that, Harry, and while you're at it, maybe call a therapist too." It was the ultimate mic drop moment. It was her way of saying, "I'm not afraid of you. I'm not impressed by you, and I'm certainly not going to let you bully me on my own show." The whole incident lasted less than 10 minutes from start to finish. 10 minutes that completely changed the narrative around Prince Harry. 10 minutes that showed the world who he really is when he doesn't get his way. 10 minutes that proved Whoopi Goldberg is still one of the sharpest, most fearless hosts in the business. Think about the contrast between these two people. On one side, you have Whoopi, a woman who came from nothing and built an incredible career through talent, hard work, and determination. A woman who has faced discrimination and adversity and came out stronger. A woman who uses her platform to speak truth to power, no matter who's sitting across from her. On the other side, you have Harry, a man who was born into privilege, a man who has had every advantage in life, a man who claims to want privacy and normalcy, but can't stop doing interviews and making public appearances. A man who preaches about compassion and understanding, but can't take criticism without melting down. The irony is almost too much. Harry came on The View to talk about his charity work, to present himself as this champion of good causes. But instead, he revealed himself to be thin-skinned, arrogant, and completely unable to handle honest dialogue. He wanted the platform without the accountability. He wanted the spotlight without the scrutiny. And when he didn't get that, he lost it. Whoopi, meanwhile, showed exactly why she's been successful for so long. She didn't escalate. She didn't match his energy. She stayed professional even when he was being completely unprofessional. She gave him multiple opportunities to course correct, to answer the question like an adult, but he chose chaos instead. He chose entitlement instead. And she had no choice but to show him the door. When security stepped in, that was the final confirmation of how badly Harry had messed up. Getting escorted out of a talk show by security is not something that happens to people who are handling themselves well. It's what happens when you've crossed a line, when you've become disruptive, when you've made it impossible for the show to continue with you there. And even as he was being let out, Harry couldn't let it go. He kept muttering. He kept shaking his head. He couldn't accept that he was wrong. He couldn't accept that he had brought this on himself. In his mind, he was the victim. Whoopi was the villain. The audience was sheep. Everyone was wrong except him. That level of denial is actually pretty sad. It shows someone who is so wrapped up in their own narrative that they can't see reality anymore. Someone who has convinced themselves that any criticism is an attack, that any challenge is persecution, that anyone who doesn't agree with them must have ulterior motives. The moment the door closed behind him, you could feel the energy in the studio shift. There was a collective exhale, a release of tension, and then Whoopi, being the consummate professional that she is, just moved on. She didn't gloat. She didn't spend the rest of the show talking about what had just happened. She simply acknowledged it briefly and went back to work. That's class. That's what real strength looks like. Not throwing tantrums when things don't go your way. Not insulting people who dare to question you, but staying calm, standing your ground, and then moving forward with grace. The whole incident became a masterclass in how to handle difficult guests. Whoopi did everything right. She asked a fair question. She gave him a chance to answer. When he got defensive, she remained calm. When he got aggressive, she stood firm. When he crossed the line, she removed him. Every step was measured. Every response was appropriate. She never lost control of the situation. Compare that to Harry's behavior. He immediately got defensive. He made it personal. He raised his voice. He insulted the host and the audience. He refused to engage with the question. He played victim. He made threats. He stormed off. At every turn, he made the wrong choice. And here's the thing that makes it even more frustrating. The question Whoopi asked wasn't even that hard. But she wasn't asking him to reveal state secrets. She wasn't attacking his family. She was simply asking him to address a common criticism, that he seems to court attention while claiming to want privacy. That's a legitimate question, one that deserves a thoughtful answer. If Harry had just taken a breath and given an honest, straightforward response, this could have been a great interview. He could have explained his perspective. He could have acknowledged the contradiction and talked about why he makes the choices he makes. He could have used it as an opportunity to connect with people who might be skeptical of him. Instead, he blew it all up. The saddest part is that Harry probably thought he was standing up for himself. He probably thought he was being strong, refusing to be pushed around. But strength isn't about yelling and making threats. Strength is about being able to face difficult questions with honesty and humility. Strength is what Whoopi showed, not what Harry showed. So what did we learn from this explosive encounter? We learned that titles don't mean much when you can't back them up with character. We learned that being a prince doesn't give you the right to disrespect people. And we learned that Whoopi Goldberg is not someone you want to mess with. She proved once again why she's been at the top of her game for so long.